of information to go through in quite a short period of time. So I think it'll be very helpful that you can revisit the parts that were key for yourselves and also share it to other parents and students who are interested in this process. So as I said, I'm just going to start sharing my screen with yourselves and we'll make a start. I know there's probably going to be a few more people joining us. So as you're aware, this is basically an evening to do with the UCAS early entry process, and it's going to be myself leading it, moderating it with a number of speakers. We've got Miss Power, who's the principal of CTK Aquinas, joining us tonight, and we've also got Miss Lower, who's the careers advisor at CTK Aquinas. So I'm hoping you'll find it interesting. There's certainly a lot of information to go through in an hour and a quarter. So I'm going to try and keep it to that hour and a quarter, but I know it does often run over a few minutes just with the question and answer from parents. So as you're probably aware, I think most people have heard of UCAS nowadays. So in very simple terms, UCAS is the Universities and Colleges Admission Service. Okay, it's an online charity, and it's the way people apply for almost all higher education courses. It's all done online. You can see there's a little there's a student there on the diagram. They do an application form and it generally gets sent off to 5 universities, all online. The application for most courses will likely be the 25th of January in 2024. However, and that's the purpose of tonight, if you're interested in applying to the study at the universities of Oxford or Cambridge, which is often referred to as Oxbridge, or for courses in medicine, dentistry, veterinary medicine or science, then things are slightly different and they are more time sensitive. So as I said, that's the purpose of this evening, to give you that information. Okay, in very simple terms, and there are quite a few other differences, but in the two major differences I would always highlight is there's a much earlier deadline, which is almost certainly going to be Sunday, the 15th of October. Sorry, that should be 2023. I've just realized I've made that mistake with my years. But instead of it being towards the end of January 2024, it will be October, mid-October 2023. As well as the UCAS application, which is done online, it will likely involve additional testing or interviews. Okay, so because these courses tend to be far more to be the most challenging to get onto, the most requested courses, etc., the most competitive, there's not just the application form. They often look at additional testing or interviews to try and make sure they've got the strongest candidates for those positions. So as I said, those are two very simple but major differences. And the purpose of this evening is to really give you that breakdown of information into those different areas. So I'm about to hand you over to Miss Power, who's in charge of the Aquinas site. What will be followed on by then is an overview of the early entry application process. And that's going to be with Lauren from the University of Oxford and Gwyneth from the University of Cambridge. So they're going to give you an overview of how the early entry process works, especially for Oxbridge. We're then very pleased that we're going to have Lorena, who's a former CTK student. She's going to talk about her experiences of going through the application process, the interview process, etc., to gain a place at the University of Cambridge. And we're lucky that she joined the University of Cambridge a couple of years ago, but we've had great success in recent years in all these areas that we're looking at tonight. Following on from Lorena, we're going to have Mardi, who's another former CTK student. He's going to be talking about his experiences of applying for medicine and giving some hints and tips, etc. That's going to be followed by Assad, who's was a student at Queen Mary University, which we've got very strong links with. He's just become a foundation dentist. So he's gone through, I think, the 5 years of training and is now a foundation dentist. And he's again going to give you his hints and tips about applying for dentistry. And then I'm hoping, although it was a little bit up in the air, that the final speaker is going to be Sean, who is a senior lecturer at the University of Surrey, and she's going to give hints and tips about applying for veterinary medicine. What I would say is that there are similarities between all of the things. So, you know, it's not the end of the world if Sean can't join us. I'll just stop there. That was just my final couple of slides. Oh, I'm hoping I'm going to stop sharing in a second. Ms. Power, if you want to add anything to what I've just started us off on with.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, David, for kicking us off. And I just wanted to take this time to say a huge thank you to all of the speakers who have joined us tonight. I know you're really busy people and we really appreciate your time. And all of the parents and the students that have also joined us tonight. Absolutely. I know everybody joining this session are, high students and parents with high aspirations and aiming for the absolute top grades and applying to the most competitive university places. And already we've been so proud of how many of the opportunities you've already taken up. I know many of you have already visited the universities, taken part in the Lewisham Challenge events that have taken place on site already. And my main one piece of advice I would say to you and to the parents is just keep saying yes to all these opportunities that come your way. As Sarah inferred, we've had a huge increase in the number of students being invited for interview to Oxford and Cambridge and for medicine this year. And I would say that the key difference is that those students have really taken every opportunity given to them to prepare for the interviews, to prepare for the tests, to find out about the courses they're applying, to develop their super curricular knowledge, and then to make sure they were in a position where they were predicted good enough grades when they're applying to university. So for them, the mock exams, sort of the end of year 12 exams, were absolutely vital to make sure their predictions are where they needed to be. So I would say that would just be a main area of focus, but it is a complicated process. And so I hope that tonight helps in terms of making sure everybody understands that process. I won't take any more of the time because I just think it's so important that the speakers get as much time as they can, and particularly it's lovely to hear from our alumni. Lorena, thank you for coming, because I think it can be quite a daunting and overwhelming process for the students, and it's really nice to be able to talk to somebody who's done it recently, more recently than I have anyway. Finally, I just wanted to say to parents, we're launching soon, and will be in our newsletter, a parent forum, and we're looking for a small group of parents who would be keen to take part in a group once a term, just to sit down, talk to me, some feedback, and discuss what it's like being a parent at CTK Aquinas. So if you would be keen to get involved in that, I would really appreciate it if you could drop me an email or just write in the chat the name of the student, and we will contact you and arrange some dates. I'd really appreciate that. So I'll put my email address in the chat. I know most of you have got it, but just in case. And if you are keen to take part in the the parent forum, I'd really appreciate that. All right, thanks so much. I'll hand over back to you, sir. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Mrs. Power. So I'm going to pass it on to Lauren. Lauren, I'm not sure if Gwyneth is on, but do you have the presentation? Or?
I do have it. I found it, so that is good.
Fantastic. So as I was just saying at the start, Lauren's going to give you an overview, hopefully for about 15 or 20 minutes, if that's okay. I know it's very hard packing so much information in. What I would just say to parents is that the actual UCAS application form that is online is quite simple. So if you've ever done a job application form, which I'm sure most people have, it's not a million miles different from that. It's a matter of your son or daughter putting down who they are, where they live, their grades, writing a page about themselves, and a CTK writing a page. What we're looking at is sort of that beyond that. They'll get lots of help and support in the tutorial. So, don't worry about this. We're more focusing on what the additionalities are with the early application process. So, yeah, Lauren, if I'm okay to pass on to you for the next 15 or so minutes or 20, but some of it will be duplicated in tonight, like with some of the speakers, but that's why we'll try to be a bit concise. Thank you, Lauren. So, yeah, if you are able to share your screen.
Yeah, I will share it now. Can I just check you can see that okay?
Yes.
Brilliant. Okay, so thank you for the introduction. I'm not sure if Gwyneth is here or if she's coming. I thought she was. Maybe she's having some technical issues. But I will kind of get started, and maybe she'll join during this. But yeah, so my name is Lauren. I work at the Queen's College at the University of Oxford, and my role is basically a schools liaison and access officer. So my job is essentially to come to schools and sessions like this and give information about applying to Oxford and also Cambridge, and kind of what you can be doing now to be thinking about that process. So this session, I'm going to basically cover a little bit about what Oxford and Cambridge is like, how they're different to other universities, and just repeating what I've just said, kind of what you can be doing now and what you should be thinking about if you're interested in pursuing this route in the future. So first of all, a little bit about why you might want to consider Cambridge or Oxford as your potential university. There are a few different things that make these universities quite unique and different to other ones across the country. The first thing really is we have quite a different teaching system. So we have something called tutorials here at Oxford, and they're called supervisions at Cambridge. And it's basically a really kind of small group teaching. So at school or at sixth form, you're used to, big classes, maybe 30 students with a teacher, maybe a bit less at sixth form. But at university, that really shrinks down to maybe 2 or 3 students in a session. You still get, the lectures and the practicals and the seminars and things, but these tutorials really are, quite a major part of your teaching. You will, as part of this, have really kind of developed one-on-one contact with a tutor. So it's a really good way of getting personalized teaching, and it's something that the students really enjoy and value. Obviously, you have access to amazing facilities and resources. You can see some of the beautiful libraries we have at Oxford and Cambridge in those photos. And I mean, at Oxford, we have every single book that's ever been published in one form or another. So you have access to all this cool stuff and, state-of-the-art laboratories and that kind of thing. If you're thinking, oh, okay, this is a bit different to what I thought, and it might be something I'd be interested in, there is a bit of a long-winded process about for applying to Oxford or Cambridge. So as Sarah was just talking about, the UCAS process, you do follow that when you apply to Oxford or Cambridge, but there are a few more steps involved. So here is a graphic of the different steps that are involved. Obviously, first of all, choosing your course is a really big choice and an important choice. And I'm going to talk a bit in a second about how you actually go about choosing that. Once you've chosen your course, you would then be choosing a college, and I'll talk a little bit about what the college system is in a second and how you would choose one of those. Once you've done that, you need to check whether your course has any admissions tests that you would need to sit, or if there is any kind of associated written work with your application. So this is one of the big differences about Oxford and Cambridge, is a lot of the courses do have tests that you need to sit as part of your application. And I know that sounds super scary, but it is just another way of kind of assessing you to make sure that it's really fair when we're assessing all the people that apply. Once you've checked those deadlines, and obviously you take those tests later on, you then submit your UCAS application. So as has already been mentioned, that will be your personal statement where you write a little bit about why you want to do that course and why you are a good candidate for that course, and also about the super curricular activities, which I'll talk about in a second. Then you would do your written work or take that test or whatever that you've already checked before. I'm not going to talk about the SAQ because Gwyneth knows about that. So unfortunately, that is a gap in my knowledge. But after you've done the test or the written work, you would then, if you're successful, be invited to an interview. And this is also quite a different step compared to other universities. These interviews are quite academic in nature. They talk about your kind of I don't know, inspiration for the course, a little bit about why you're interested in that course, but it's mostly really academically focused questions to assess your knowledge of the course. And then you find out if you've got in or not in January. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about different kind of routes depending on which course you're interested in. So if you're thinking about the sciences, hopefully there are a few of you here. I'm a chemist, so yeah, I think this is a good choice. So if you are considering science, you can at Cambridge do a natural sciences degree, which in that instance you would choose at least 2 or 3 of different science courses, and that would make up your degree. At Oxford, it's a little bit different. You would just pick one of the sciences and you would study just one science. So at Oxford, we have like a biology degree, a chemistry degree, physics. At Cambridge, you might pick a combination of those things to make up your degree. So when you're thinking about whether it's Oxford or Cambridge you might want to go to, that is something, if you're thinking of sciences, that you should be considering. Alongside this, there are loads of other courses that you probably haven't even heard of that are available. So things like material science, maybe engineering, or you might have heard of it, but you might not know what it actually involves. It's worth having a look on the websites and just really understanding what is involved in each of the courses, as you might find a course that you haven't heard of or you don't know much about that could really tailor to your interests. So things like biomedical sciences or biochemistry or something like that might be good for you. If you are considering humanities or the arts or social sciences, these don't really have any required subjects that you have to do at A level. Some of them do, but again, it's worth checking on the websites to see kind of which subjects are required for different ones. However, what they do want is you to have studied subjects where you've been able to do some essay writing, being able to craft arguments and that kind of thing. So if you're considering history, for example, obviously you might be really interested in history, but other A levels that you've done, such as maybe, I don't know, law, geography, psychology, all of those subjects where you're able to write essays is also really kind of useful skills. So I'm going to move on from this now because I've got plenty more stuff to cover. Coming back to this idea of choosing your course. So things you want to be thinking about now is obviously this is kind of the first step in your university application journey. So really it's important to think about what actually interests you out of the A levels you're doing. Maybe which one's your favorite one, which one are you really interested in, which one could you imagine yourself sitting down for ages and just reading and thinking about, and you're not going to get bored. um, do you feel like you would enjoy talking to someone about it, and not getting bored in a conversation? And would you be happy to do your own independent research on that subject? And if you can think of something that you are interested in this way, then that is probably the course that would be most suited to you. Because we always say at Oxford, I'm sure it's the same at Cambridge, the people that do best on their courses and the people that are successful in getting in are just really passionate about their subject and they really enjoy it. And that's the main thing. So to do that and to kind of, it's quite a big thing to say, well, this is the one I'm most interested in. How are you supposed to know? The way that you find that out is by doing a bit of research around it. And there are plenty of different ways that you can kind of find out about the subject, maybe get a bit of an idea about something you're interested in, and just kind of run with it. So on this slide, there are loads of different resources that you can use. I mean, I can send these slides over so that you can reference them in the future. But I'm just going to point out a couple of good ones that I think are useful to use now. So there is one, I have to find it. Yeah, this one at the bottom in the left-hand corner. Oxplore is one of our Oxford websites, and you can go on there and it basically brings up all these big questions that don't really have an answer, and you can engage with that and kind of dig into the arguments for and against these questions, and engaging with those questions and kind of writing a note of how you found it and what you found interesting about it is a really good way of exploring a subject. Another one is this one, Staircase 12. I think no, there's no link, but if you type in Staircase 12 on Google, it comes up with another website, and there are loads of resources on there depending on the subject, so you can like filter down to a specific subject and it will bring up different articles, different books, different YouTube videos, documentaries, podcasts, anything that's related to that subject that you can go away and just kind of listen to or watch or read. It's a really good resource. I would recommend that one. As well as that, Oxford and Cambridge run loads of different competitions. So we have like essay competitions all across the different colleges, and they will all be online. You can research them really easily. So it's not just, reading a book, which can be a bit boring. You can also get involved in different competitions and essay competitions, national competitions like the Chemistry Olympiad, for example. There's loads of ways that you can get involved with your subject, and these are the things that we're really interested in when you apply to us. So I think I've pretty much covered that, but really the main thing with this is, yes, you can read all this stuff, yes, you can watch any documentaries, but it's really about getting critical with it and really engaging with it on another level. So, if you read something, have a think about, well, what is the argument of this article? What is the evidence? How can I find out more about it? And not just reading it, taking it at face value, but really taking an analytical lens to it. So I think that's a really important point as well. Now we've talked about choosing your course, just conscious of the time, so I'm going to skip over this quickly, but choosing a college is your next important thing. Now, the main thing to say about colleges is they're basically mini university campuses within the university. So at Oxford, we have, I think, 39 different colleges. They all offer pretty much the same thing. The main difference about them is, some of them might be a lot bigger, some of them might be smaller, some of them might be more modern, some more traditional, some are big, some are small, that kind of thing. It's not about which one is easier or harder to get into. It's none of that. It's really about what's the vibe that you want to go for and where would you be happy living, really. And to choose one, there's plenty of virtual tours on YouTube and online. And, if you are available for one of our open days, I would highly recommend coming along and just having a look round. You don't have to choose a college if you don't want to. You can just put in an open application and the university will basically assign you one, depending on the applications that year. So I'm just going to talk a little bit now about what information we use to assess each application. So we will use, obviously, your grades, your predicted A-level grades, and we do look at GCSEs as well. We will look at your personal statement, which is on your UCAS form, and your teacher will submit a reference as well. If you've done an admissions test or any written work, we will look at that. We will also look at more contextual data. So we look at the school that you go to, we look at kind of your performance compared to everyone else in your year group. And that really helps us to understand if you've faced any difficulties throughout your school life, to make sure that we, are making a really fair decision about who we are taking. And obviously the final thing is the interview. We take that into consideration as well. Now, I always get the question about, is one of these things more important than the other thing? And in reality, the answer is no. We look at all these things equally. And, we have people saying, oh, I did really bad in this one interview. Am I not going to get in? And that's just not the case. We don't take these things in isolation. It's really a kind of holistic process. Here is just a couple more links. I will send through the slides so that you can access these. But what I would encourage you to do now is just do a little bit of homework, really. I've only got 15 or 20 minutes today, but have a look online, have a look at the different course websites, have a look at YouTube videos of, the virtual tours of the colleges, and really just start that process now so that when you are coming to do your UCAS application in year 13, you're not really stressed and, you're making a very pressured decision. It's really important to be kind of aware of what you might potentially want to do now. And we find that, people who are prepared and have done this process for, a year or so in advance are the ones that are more relaxed and, ones that, they're going to be more comfortable with the process. So I would definitely recommend just doing a little bit of homework now. I've already talked about that. I'll skip past that. Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything, and I'm really sorry that was really brief. And Gwyneth wasn't here to add anything, but if I don't know if we're going to do Q&A now or
are you
later
okay
on.
hanging on, and if we do it at the end, is that possible?
Yes, that's
Lauren?
fine. Yeah.
I don't know also if you're able to upload the presentation in the chat. It sometimes works, it sometimes doesn't. So, or not the chat, there's the file sort of outside of the
Yeah.
outside of Teams. So if that is possible,
Yeah.
that would be perfect, because then parents can be taking a look at it. So no, loads of really useful information there, Lauren. Really appreciate that. What I'm going to do now is pass us on to Lorena, who's a former student of CTK. And I gave her a bit of help, and I know our careers team, lots of people gave her help. So Lorena, if you're there, would you be happy to come on camera and explain about your own experiences and giving some hints and tips, or if there was anything you'd done differently? I think the one thing I just carry on from what Lauren said is, you know, the early any UCAS application, if there's one thing I'd advise my students or younger self to do, and I used to be, and probably still am to a certain degree, what I'd call a last minute Larry, leaving everything till a deadline. If there's one thing I would do ahead of time, whether it's an early application or just UCAS in general, do your UCAS application form, because it's the summary of your 2 years at sixth form. So you really want to make sure it's the best, and you give yourself the confidence that you're ahead of time. So Lorena, over to yourself.
Hi, I'm just going to quickly set up my presentation and hopefully it will work.
Fantastic, and thank you once again for joining us.
So can everyone see that?
Yes.
So I thought I'd just start off with a quick introduction. So hi, I'm Lorena. I'm a CTK alumni who studied from 2019 to 2021. So I studied psychology, English literature, law, and pre global perspectives, and I graduated with an A-star AA. I'm now studying at Cambridge. In my first year, I did psychological and behavioural sciences with sociology and politics. And now I'm studying human, social, and political sciences, and specifically just studying sociology as its own subject in that. So I know we briefly went over why study at Oxbridge, so most of these reasons were already talked about. One point that I would like to mention is that you work very closely with well-known academics. Some of the most famous people in the world have literally walked through the grounds of Oxbridge, such as J.R.R. Tolkien and Stephen Hawking. For example, my friend is actually being supervised by Robert Attenborough, David Attenborough's son. So if that might be something you're interested in, it's definitely a really cool reason to study at Oxbridge. Another reason to study at Oxbridge is that unique courses which don't exist at other universities in the UK or even in the world take place in these grounds. So for example, my degree, HSPS, doesn't exist in any other universities, so you're going to get a very unique curriculum that you won't be able to access anywhere else in the world. Like before, we've already gone through the process. I'll happily briefly touch up on the SAQ as it's something that I went through. So in brief, it's kind of a Cambridge unique UCAS form. So once you apply, you'll be given access to a Cambridge application portal. And through this, you'll have to fill out an SAQ. So it's just filling in your own personal details. And like I said, it's a mini UCAS form where you can fill out some extra information about things you didn't get to mention. You could go into more details about things you spoke about in your UCAS application to show that you're really interested in your course. So I want to talk a little bit in detail about how to go about writing a Oxbridge personal statement. So this is an opportunity to show your interest and ability in your subject by showcasing how you interact with it inside and outside of education. So examples of how this can be done is through books you've read, an EPQ you've written, a prize you've won, lectures you've attended, documentaries you've watched, podcasts you've listened to, absolutely anything. I know someone, she mentioned that she wrote about enjoying fan fiction and writing fan fiction in her personal statement. So truly anything that can show passion for your degree and your course will get you there. So I've given a sort of basic structure. So you should have an opening paragraph explaining why you want to study the course, followed by 3 or 4 paragraphs analysing your academic and supercurricular activities, and finally a short closing paragraph about your extracurricular interests, focusing on transferable skills, future career aspirations, as well as any relevant work experience. I would like to point out that this should all link back to your course, as unlike other universities, Oxbridge personal statements should mainly focus on academic ability and potential. So over here, I've just given a structure of what my psychology personal statement looked like. I'd be quite happy to send this slide over if you want to have like a proper look at it. So in my first paragraph, I wrote about what sparked my interest in psychology through personal life experiences and the subjects I studied at A-level. In my second paragraph, I wrote about 2 pieces of work I carried out, which were psychology-based, and I explained how this would assist me in my course. In my third paragraph, I then shifted to how I incorporated learning into my everyday life, such as reading books on different psychological phenomena and subscribing to a psychology newsletter. And in my final paragraph, it was all about work experience and how this had transferable skills to my degree, and discussed potential career paths in the mental health sector. So just some general advice for writing a personal statement. As everyone has emphasised, please start drafting early. It is useful to have a first draft written probably before you return to year 13, as it gives you time to do some extra reading over the summer, work experience, but also it gives you lots of time to rework your statement with different teachers. Another thing, never lie in your UCAS statement, because in interviews you may be questioned on certain topics, books, etc. that you've written about. As such, write about things you are genuinely interested in to show the interviewer that you're passionate about the topic. Because if you write something that you haven't really done and they ask you a question you don't really have an answer, that's not going to look very good on you. And finally, don't just give examples, explain. So this is to demonstrate a thoughtful approach to your studies. So you can do this by, yes, giving an example of something you found particularly interesting, and then going in to explain why you found it interesting and why this is relevant to your degree. So a little bit of advice on picking a course. Please do your research on the course, because as mentioned, it's so important that you're doing a degree that you enjoy, as it will truly make or break your experience. At Oxbridge, you will be spending many hours reading, researching and writing about your subject. As someone who first picked a degree that they didn't particularly enjoy and then had to go through the hassle of switching degrees, it will save you a lot of time and stress by doing proper research, making sure this is something you really want to do for 3 to 6 years, depending on the length of your course. And another thing to bear in mind is that you have to consider the entry requirements, as for certain degrees you'll need specific A levels, and additionally Oxbridge has high grade requirements which range from A star AA to A star A star A star. So some quick advice on picking a college, which I think is one of the most important parts of Cambridge, because it's where you'll be spending a lot of your time, it's where you'll be eating, it's mostly where you'll be living. So first of all, accommodation. Do you want the classic styled college or a modern college? This is more kind of an aesthetic thing to consider. Traveling, would you like to be in the town centre or further out? Is the college close to your subject department, which is important to consider? For example, I'm at Homerton College, as mentioned, which is quite far out from my subject department. It's not something that I particularly mind, but it's what other people might want to consider. Finances. Some colleges have more expensive accommodation. Other colleges may offer different types of bursaries. So if you want to consider, if you may have any financial issues at university, this is something to look into, because some colleges may have more expensive accommodation, but then they offer more expensive bursaries. Environments. So some colleges have a higher intake of state school students compared to others. Not to be biased to Homerton, but Homerton has the highest intake of state school students and BME students, which is one of the reasons why I applied there. Another thing to consider, I'm not sure if it's the same at Oxford, but at Cambridge we do have some colleges which are women only. If this is something you would like to consider, then please do. Another thing, be careful when applying to colleges, because there are some which are mature, so do your research, as you won't be able to apply to these colleges. Subjects. Some colleges won't offer certain degrees, and some will have different entry requirements for the same degree. So for example, at Peterhouse College, psychology isn't offered as a degree, and at Homerton College, psychology is offered, but it has different grade requirements and different subject requirements compared to other colleges. And finally, facilities. Would you like an on-site gym? Some colleges have pools, which are important things to consider. And the big thing that people don't tell you about Cambridge and Oxford is that some of the accommodation doesn't have ovens. So if you're a big chef, please look in to see if the college you're applying to has an oven or not. Now, moving on to interviews, I understand that grades are a big part of the Oxbridge process, but in my opinion, I think interviews may be just as important as that. This is a moment where you're really expressing your passion for your subject. So my top tips would be to know your personal statement inside out, because you will likely be asked questions about what you've written. And bear in mind that what you write about may influence the direction of your interview, so you could use this to your advantage. Another thing is to think outside the box, because you'll be required to apply your knowledge to new situations. As such, be prepared to tackle situations you've never seen before at A-level. Third tip is to read around your subject, because Oxford and Cambridge really like well-read students. So showing that you're passionate and knowledgeable about any topics will give you an edge over your competition. Fourth, practice makes perfect. So I would advise that you find previous interview questions online, and this will give you kind of a rough idea of what interviews will likely to ask you. What I did in CTK is I would ask my teachers in my subject to review these questions with me to prepare me for quick thinking and just kind of get me into the mindset of interviews so I wouldn't panic when I'm in there. And my final tip is stay calm in an interview, because when you panic, that is when you will start to forget everything. I would advise to learn some breathing exercises just so it can help you stay focused. So I just want to talk a little bit about what my experience was like as a first year, like all academic wise. So this is as a psychology student, you have around 8 hours of lectures per day. You generally have around 2 to 4 hours of supervisions a week, 2 to 4 essays a week, which is something that isn't always possible. I'd like to point out that yes, there's a heavy academic workload at Cambridge. However, you can talk to your supervisors, ask for extensions, submit essay plans. There have been times where I've gone to supervisions and not submitted anything at all, just because, you know, it's not always possible. Pre-lecture reading, rewriting lecture notes, etc. And my average work day would be from about 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. with breaks, of course, with like time to socialize, with time to make dinner and lunch. And then I would like to talk a little bit about my average second year week, like as a sociology student. I would like to point out that there tends to be a major difference between STEM and humanities contact hours. This is not to say that one degree is easier or harder than the other, but it's just important to consider that they will have just different ways of running the course. So in sociology, I instead have 6 hours of lectures a week, 12 hours of supervisions a term, around 12 essays per term. Once again, not always possible. Please know that communication is key at Cambridge, letting your supervisors know when things aren't possible, if circumstances are hard. In humanities and social sciences, you'll have lots of reading, and that can all depend on the topic, how much additional reading you're going to do for your essays. And then in second year, average work day around 8:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. So in my final slides, I just want to give my big advice to potential Cambridge applicants. I say if you're thinking of applying, just do it. You're not going to lose anything by applying. And honestly, the worst thing that can happen is that you get turned down. At the end of the day, at least you know you tried. And if you get turned down from Oxbridge, it's not the end of your academic career. My second piece of advice, once again, start preparing early, because the more prepared you are, the better, because the Oxbridge process, as you've seen, is long and intense, and by being prepared, you get rid of all that additional stress. And my last piece of advice, just be sure that this is what you want. As I've mentioned, Oxbridge can be quite a stressful environment, so it's also important to consider whether you'll be able to cope with the academic pressure. However, although it's very academic based, it's also such a unique experience and unique environment that you can only experience at these two universities. And a final bit of advice is to the future applicants who get in, because I know inevitably some people in this Zoom call will get in. So congratulations in advance. And these are some things I wish I knew before I went into Cambridge. So first of all, imposter syndrome. This is normal and sometimes it doesn't truly go away. I'm a second year who still deals heavily with imposter syndrome, but the most important thing is just finding people who can support you during your doubts and finding support at college. My second thing is that when you do get into Cambridge, you will not be doing amazing all the time. when you're a high achiever transition into Oxbridge, you can suddenly go from the top of your class to average or even below average. For example, I failed all my first year mocks in my first year. However, you will improve because it's just such a new environment, a new way of learning. I ended up being able to achieve a 2-1 by the end of the year. So when you go to Oxbridge, it will all be a learning process. And my final thing is have fun. So yes, there is an intense workload, as you've seen by my week, but don't let it become your life. You know, you can take days off, ask for extensions, remember to join societies, hang out with friends, and just get out there in Oxbridge because both cities have so much to explore. Yeah, that's all I really have to say.
Hi, Lorena. That was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. I know we're going to do a question and answer at the end, and we're a bit short on time as always. But can I just ask you one quick follow-up question that I just think might be quite useful?
Yeah.
In terms of obviously, as I said at the start to people, parents and students, they'll get a lot of support from CTK. But just in terms of your own accessing the support or the help we gave you, is there any hints and tips just just around that, or making sure people take the support when and where needed?
So I mean, the best people that I'd recommend to is obviously the careers advisors, but also I'd recommend talking to like your subject teachers. So for example, obviously because I applied for a psychology degree, I was mainly in contact with the psychology department at CTK and they were able to support me. Another thing that's recommended is sometimes to have your English teacher go over your UCAS personal statement, just because they can give you any advice on what sounds better, maybe what bits to take out, etc. But yeah, please use the careers advisors to your benefit because that will really help you out.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Thank you, Lorena. And what I would just say, just in terms of personal statements, I always say to everybody, only show it to one person at once. Otherwise, you'll get about 5 million different pieces of advice if you show it to lots and lots of people. So do it the best you can. Show it to one person and then the next. Now, I was going to pass on to Mardi. Mardi, are you on? Mardi's a trainee doctor, so he may well have been pulled off and not unavailable. So I think, as we're all aware, the NHS has is under considerable pressure. So, Ms. Lower, I don't know if you're there, but I'm going to pass it on to Asad now to talk about dentistry. But I don't know if you would feel comfortable maybe just saying a few words about the process of applying to go into medicine towards the end. I don't know if that's something that you feel comfortable with. I know you know more about it than I do, but
Yeah,
if we pass on to Asad now, because I know there's some duplication, I'll let Sean's going to give us some hints and tips. Sean, some hints and tips to do with veterinary after Asad. So yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Ms. Lower. Asad, if I'm okay to pass on to you, thank you so much for joining us again. Asad was at Queen Mary University, as I said at the start, a university a lot of our students go to. So fantastic. I'm so glad to hear you you've qualified and are now a foundation dentist, Asad.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ms. Pearson. So, like Ms. Pearson has said, I'm Asad. I'm a foundation dentist working currently in oral and maxillofacial sort of medicine at Royal Surrey Hospital. And hopefully you guys can see that now as the slides come up.
Yes. Yeah.
Amazing. Great. So yeah, today I'm here to talk to you a bit about dentistry and applying and what you can expect, but I'm very happy to talk about my job at the moment and how life as a dentist is. There's also going to be a lot of overlap with medicine as well, because a lot of it is the same. So if you have any medicine questions, feel free to ask, and I can do my best, as well as Mr. Lauer, to sort of answer them. So a bit about me. I joined Barts in the London or Queen Mary in 2017, and I qualified in 2022. So literally like 4 months ago, or whatever, 6 months ago. And I applied to Barts, so Queen Mary, King's, Manchester and Bristol. And really I did that because of location, pretty much, because I like those cities. Obviously London, Manchester and Bristol, very, very good cities. I've also sat on the panel at Barts interviewing people, so I'm very aware of what's going on at interview and sort of what we look for. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask at the Q&A session. And for dentistry and medicine, you only get, and veterinary science, I believe, as well, you only get four choices for that subject. So your fifth choice has to be something non-medicine or non-dentistry, etc. So mine was biochemistry at Warwick. And in terms of work experience, I did 2 weeks in a mixed practice, And I also did a week in a private practice and 1 week in hospital as well. So I got quite a variety of experience prior to applying. So you may be asking, what do I need to do to prepare in order to get ready? So these are really 5 actionable steps that you've got to take. So first thing, and probably the most important, is decide if dentistry is for you. Write your personal statement, prepare for the UCAT, show you have the key skills needed to be a dentist, and show those skills at interview. And then you should ideally get a place, because with the caveat that you have to obviously get the grades as well, which is another story and is also quite difficult. And we'll go through each one of these and I'll try and break it down for you guys. So the first thing, decide if dentistry is for you. So you really need to know what you're signing up for, and because really you're doing a 5-year degree, however, you are really training to be a dentist, and dentistry is just a degree that's going to make you a dentist. So this is a vocational course, which is going to eventually, you're going to have to pretty much commit 30-40 years of service to this profession if you decide to go down this route. So the best way to do that is through work experience, of course, and trying to get that, I understand, is quite difficult given the period we're in at the moment. However, I'll give you some steps that you can take to try and get some work experience, which apply to this and also to medicine as well. And you also need to research it. So plenty of Google searches. YouTube is one of the best resources, and also sort of looking at articles and what's going on within dentistry at the moment. So to find work experience, I have to say the first thing is you'll be rejected a lot, given that you're in sort of just aftermath of COVID and people aren't quite as keen to have work experience students in the there. What I recommend is that you go on the NHS Choices website, search for dentists near you and call them and ask every single one whether they have space. And if they don't have the capacity to have work experience students, I recommend speaking to team members over the phone, because that can be very useful, and just say, can I have you for 5 minutes at the end of your day? And I'm sure they'll be happy to help. I also recommend calling local hospitals and dental technicians, as they work with dentists, and that they'll be quite that will give you quite a good insight. There's a course which is completely free called Discover Dentistry by University of Sheffield, and I recommend that to show that you've got some kind of commitment to the degree. Reading through articles, of course, is very important to see what you're actually signing up for in terms of what's going on within dentistry, and showing that you're sort of up to date with the knowledge. Provide that's all okay and you've decided that dentistry is for you, the second thing is going to be that you're going to have to write your personal statement. So you have 4,000 characters or 47 lines, and this is a sort of structure I recommend. I also recommend this for medicine as well. So I recommend the first paragraph being motivation. Why do you want to study medicine or dentistry? The middle paragraphs being about reflection on work experience that you've done. And the final bit being a conclusion, which is a sort of short, snappy summary, which of course you can ask people to look over, but I recommend not having too many people look over it, because of course then you get lots of different opinions. So maybe try and get a few people to look at it, particularly people who are dentally sort of related, because that will really help you, or medically related. So the tips for the personal statement: be reflective, not descriptive. So reflect, and this is a model called the Gibbs reflective model, which you can look at and Google, and it will tell you sort of how to write reflections properly. Keep everything short and snappy. Don't waffle, because you basically just don't have the space. You don't have the letters or the characters. And triple check for grammar and spelling errors, because if you have one, it's going in the bin straight away. And get people to check, but not too many, and know what universities are looking for. So you can Google Manchester Dentistry personal statement, and it tells you what they want in the personal statement. So make sure you've done that, because that's really, really important, because otherwise you're just, it's sort of a waste. And the UCAT, which is basically an exam that you sit in the summer of your going into year 13, and has 5 sections in it. So verbal reasoning, decision making, verbal reasoning is basically looking at texts and answering questions. Decision making is sort of about logic. Quantitative reasoning is maths. Abstract reasoning is sort of to do with shapes. And if anyone remembers the non-verbal tests that you might have done when you were 11 or so, that's that. And situational judgment is looking at sort of like things that have happened and giving your personal judgment. It's a test that you do online. So you go to like the driving test center and sit it there, and it's a very time pressured exam. So tips I would give is start early, use online resources to practice, because it's an online exam. Get familiar with keyboard shortcuts, practice, and research YouTube on the best way to sort of tackle this exam, because it's very, very time pressured. Like this for each one of these questions, I don't know if you can see my thing, but sort of for shape 1, shape 2, shape 3, 4, 5, etc., you have 13 seconds to decide basically which set does it go into. So there's a common thing in set A and set B, and you've got to decide where does shape 1 to 5 go in. Is it set A, set B, or none, or neither? And if you've noticed, and well done if you have, by the way, because this is really impressive. In set A, when the arrows point left, the star's black, and when the arrows point right, the stars are not black. And if you look on the set B, the converse is true. So then you found the relationship and you can put them into sort of the individual sets. So show you have the key skills needs to be a dentist. So these are just 3 that I've picked: communication, empathy, and manual dexterity. So communication being a tutor, for example, you will have your own example, maybe working in retail or whatever. Empathy, working in a care home, volunteering at a care home. And manual dexterity, this is specific for dentistry, but is very important for dentistry. Sort of how good are you with your hands, playing instruments, origami, sewing, that type of thing. So finally, you have to show those skills at interview in order to get an offer. So there's 2 types of interview: MMIs, which are basically multiple mini interviews, which are like little circuits, and there's a panel where you sort of you're with 2 or 3 people, and they basically interview you, and you don't move around at all, and it's just the same 2 people interviewing you. That's what we have at Barts. So what can I be asked? Well, you can be asked about ethics, which is sort of medical ethics, and what's your opinion on, for example, organ donation, opting in and opting out of organ donation, or blood transfusions, or non-resuscitation orders, that type of thing. What's your opinion on that? Personal statement questions, so about your personal statement. Role playing, so for example, you'd have an actor in front of you and you'll have to sort of explain to them maybe they've broken a tooth, or maybe they've got heart disease or something like that, and you'll have to explain that. Personal skills, knowledge of dentistry or medicine, so maybe you'll get questions asked about it, and manual dexterity as well. So sometimes I've heard interviews in the past where you've had to sort of do origami there on the spot, in a station with like 5 minutes and an examiner watching over you. And apparently I also heard that there was a person there being very annoying and trying to talk to you lots. So it was to see how you dealt with that. I believe this was Dundee, if I'm not mistaken. So the tips I'd give: make sure you're confident, don't rehearse your answers, and know the GDC principles and your ethics very well. So GDC is General Dental Council. I'd definitely recommend you research them and know the 9 principles that dentists are supposed to abide by. And also, if you're applying for medicine, I really recommend looking at the GMC, which is General Medical Council, and looking at what they do for medics and if they have any principles. I'm not quite sure of that. Recommend practicing. Film yourself, and you can ask for feedback, particularly if your interview's online, or you can get one of your friends face-to-face and ask them for feedback. And know the university inside out, because that's very important. Because if you get asked about what societies you like to join, as we ask at Barts, and you don't know, you don't look very well researched, and they just won't give you the place because why did you even turn up in the first place? Thank you for listening. Obviously, I'll take questions at the end.
I said that was fantastic. Thank you so much. I know there was a lot of information to get into, so that's very, very useful. Thank you so much, and thanks for being willing to stick on to the end. So I'm going to pass on to Sean now. Sean's a senior lecturer at the University of Surrey. Sean, I think I've given you presenting rights. Thank you so much for joining us. I know it's so busy for Sean. There's exams, everything going on. Would you like me to share my screen and you tell me when you want to click or to go through the slides? Oh, you're on mute at the minute.
That'd be fun. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, thank you. I can do the next slide, please, like Chris Whitty.
Yep, that's it.
Okay, well, this is a bit of a hodgepodge of slides, and one of them does mention my son's school rather than your school. Apologies.
It's absolutely fine, not a problem. Thank you so much again, though.
Yeah, so myself and my colleague Nigel, we're both the admissions tutors for Surrey. So I've just asked to come and have a bit of a chat with you tonight about the vet course and how to apply for it. So yeah, next slide, thank you. So just a bit of a myth buster initially. The vet course is not one of the hardest courses to get onto. I'll show you why in the next slide, or the one after. You don't have to own a pet to be a vet. Certainly one of my friends is an equine vet. She's never even ridden a horse, and she's owns her own equine practice and has been doing it for 30 years. So that's also a myth. You don't have to live in the countryside. We have plenty of urban candidates, and you don't have to do loads of work experience. We're working towards less and less work experience these days, just because it's interesting listening to the dentistry and the medical so on, because they're very similar. Since COVID in particular, it's been really difficult for people to get work experience, and we definitely appreciate that. And also it's really difficult if you don't know any vets to get work experience. So we fully appreciate that, and we're very aware that other things like jobs, public facing roles, because being a vet is very much about people, it's not all about animals. So it's important to us that you can show us your communication skills, and we talk about that a lot, and that you've had experience of working. That's just as important as animal related experience, although as the dentist said, you do have to know what you're letting yourself in for, so that is important as well. So yeah, next slide please. So this was just a few examples that I showed at my son's school, that vet school entry was actually easier than physics at Exeter, mechanical engineering at Manchester, interestingly sports science at Bath, and getting into London School of Economics for economics. So yeah, those were sort of typical places that the students from my son's school went to. So there's always this sort of thing that vet's the hardest to get into, but actually it's not. So next slide, please. So at the moment, vet courses are at, when I qualified, there was only 5 universities that did the course, so that's now expanded. These are the ones that currently are being accredited. There are another couple of vet schools that you can also apply to in Scotland and Lancaster, but they're currently not accredited. But I don't really see any reason why they won't finally become accredited by the Royal College of Veterinary Surgeons, but these are the ones that you would currently be applying for. Okay, next slide. So this is just a bit more about our GCSE grades, and currently for Surrey we ask for 4 weeks of work experience, but we do accept an online course, probably similar to what was mentioned for dentistry, which tells you a bit more about the profession and about the types of career that you can go into, because it's not just about general practice. There's also many other careers with army, pharmaceutical companies, amongst others. So yeah, next slide. With chemistry and biology being our critical A levels at Surrey in particular. Sorry, yeah. So this is just a bit about what we're looking for. We, as I said before, experience of working with people and being confident talking to members of the public is probably our key skill that we're really interested in. We do want to know that you are committed and that you've got a vocational interest, but as I say, you don't have to have any sort of background in being a vet. As we say many times, we teach you to be a vet. We don't need you to be a vet when you turn up. So you do need to understand the roles that vets play in society. For example, a vet is head of Pfizer, who invented the COVID vaccine. So, you know, there's all sorts of roles in practice, but also in industry and government that vets can go into as well. Just having a scientific mind is what we're looking for really as well. And a strong interest in biological sciences and how they're applied. We talk a lot about One Health, so there's quite a link between human and animal health and some of the research that we do at the university as well. So yeah, next slide, thank you. So our process at Surrey and the other vet schools will be similar. We tend to have about 1,200 applications. They then do what's called a situational judgment test, probably again similar to what they're talking about for dentistry, which streamlines those applicants. And then our biggest, to be honest, we don't really look very much at the personal statements at Surrey. And the reason for that is that we think that they aren't the fairest thing to be writing, because anybody could have written it. And also many people don't have the same support networks, and you know, we don't think it's a fair comparison because of the advantages that some people have with loads of people to check their personal statement and help them write it, whereas other people won't have that. So that's the reason that we don't put a lot of emphasis onto the personal statement at Surrey. That will differ at other vet schools. They may well use your personal statement because, for example, at Bristol, they don't interview. But for us, the biggest emphasis is on the interview. So we also run multiple mini interviews, which have been mentioned, which is a bit for the older people, a bit like speed dating, where you move around between tables and speak to a different person. Ours is actually now all online, which again, we think is more accessible for people, particularly international students who don't have to travel, more sustainable as well, but also for students who are either carers or working or would struggle to travel to cover the travel costs. So that's how we run it at Surrey, but there will still be other vet schools where it's in person. And then we make offers to approximately 450 applicants, and we take about 150 applicants at Surrey each year. But again, that will differ between universities as well. Okay, next one. And this is just, again, saying what I've said before. We're particularly interested in communication skills. We want people to have the insight, but also they need to be academically able. Next slide, thank you. Again, this is just, this is where we work. This is the inside atrium of our vet school. This is the Stag at Surrey. And just to sort of say that I think my main point for our multiple mini interviews is that we find that applicants try to wedge into every single answer their work experience and how much they know about being a vet. Just please don't do that. Just tell us what makes you tick, what your values are, why we should choose you, be a good fit for Surrey. So again, it is useful to know a bit about the university that you're applying for and about veterinary, but we're really just interested in you as a person. We're not interested in you trying to prove to us that you've done all this work experience and you own a horse or whatever. Doesn't matter. Everybody's starting at the same level playing field. We just want to know about you. Okay, so next slide, thank you. Again, these are some of the values that we look for. This is not the entire list, but our main key thing that we look for is communication. But things like, again, similar to what they're looking for with the dentists and the medics, emotional resilience, integrity, ethics, critical thinking, data interpretation. And just as an aside, this is a photo we've had recently taken of some of our students in our clinical skills. So we don't do so much live animal work in the vet schools these days. A lot of it's practicing on models. And this is all available to see for free at the open days. So again, we would encourage you. There's a lot of quite expensive courses that are offered to schools for children to go on and sort of like experience, the world of a vet. Actually, all of this is available for free at university open days. And I've known school children come in their GCSE year if they're really keen. So please don't pay for it. It's all there to be seen for free. Okay, next. And these are just some links which I have shared with David. I do have another one about the free online course. This is just me, another one of our students teaching them how to carve a cow on our carving simulator, which is fantastic. So this is just some of there's a really useful Vet School Council's information PDF, which has got all of the admissions processes for all of the UK vet schools. It's a really brilliant document. And the third link here is to a myth busting document, because some of the careers advice that's given out about veterinary is a bit outdated by some schools. And so that would be a good thing to look at, just to do some myth busting. And the first one is just one of our student societies, Animal Aspirations, who are working to try and promote ethnic diversity in the vet course, because those are underrepresented groups for us, and we're working very hard to try and rectify that. Okay, thank you very much.
The typical forgetting to turn my microphone back on. Sean, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. It was really, really interesting to get your insights, obviously, as being involved in the admissions, to see what is and isn't important. What I would just tag on to a common theme that both Sean and Ash had said was about making sure that that career is right for yourself. And sometimes I know in the past I was a bit confused what people meant by that. And I think what you've got to be aware of, and that's why work experience is so vital, is what is the good and bad things of those roles. And a couple of things I'd never thought about, because I was very lucky when I was a student. I had friends who went on to become a dentist and a vet. The one thing that my friend who's a dentist likes his job, but he really doesn't like is he spends a lot of time looking in people's mouths who really don't have very good oral hygiene. So, you've got to be aware of that. Some people might have pristine teeth, some people don't. And if you're you've just got to be aware of that. Likewise, I know somebody who gave up being a vet because they couldn't handle Well, I shouldn't say I don't think I could handle it, having to put down family pets or dogs or dealing with families in that situation. It's awful. If anybody's ever had a pet, I've been a vet in the office when somebody's been having, and it's very hard to deal with that psychologically. And a lot of the time, the same as being a doctor, you're spending it with, it's great spending time with a puppy, but a lot of the time you're spending time with the older, or, you know, it's not just the good things. So just, you've got to be aware of the full remit of what a role and career involves, just to make sure you're happy as well. So again, Sean, thank you so much. And then I don't know if you are able to stay around for the Q&A. It's no problem if you're not, because I know how busy you are, and we are recording this video so we can share it with people. So thank you very much again. And I'm just going to, I don't think Marty has been able to join us, so I'm just going to pass this on to Miss Lower, who's the careers advisor at Aquinas, but she does have quite a good knowledge of the process to become a doctor. So Miss Lower, if you could just maybe just give some of the highlights or some of the key points.
Thank you, David. I think really a lot of the messages have been covered by really well by Asad about the dentistry, and by Sean with veterinary science. Some sort of common themes that run through there are, you know, that you can get very hung up on the need to do work experience, and it's very competitive and very difficult. But COVID has kind of changed that situation, and it's good to hear from Sean and Asad's side of the fence that is recognised, that the challenges. But you do still need to be engaging. Particularly throughout year 12 and really starting from now. Ideally, you know, the process would have started last term, but, you know, it really does, it's critical what you do in year 12 to show your passion. So that doesn't necessarily need to be work experience. Obviously, that's a bonus. But if you can do some, maybe for some volunteering or some wider reading or learning or attending the myriad of online lectures that are available, just to show your curiosity, because, you know, you're not studying A-level medicine or A-level dentistry or A-level veterinary science. So you've really got to look at each of those professions and see, you know, identify, as Asad particularly pointed out, the key skills, and, you know, maybe do things that illustrate that you have those skills, and also that you do have the awareness of the challenges of the profession that you're training to go into. I think Sean mentioned the Veterinary Schools Council website, and I think the dentistry schools and the medical schools, they all have an equivalent website where it's a really, really useful resource in terms of giving you hints on how to find work experience, hints on how you can, you know, the sort of wider activities and extracurricular things you can do to show your interest in the profession. So I think the key messages have already been covered, but it's got to start now. Obviously, you still have to work really hard to get those grades, but you need to be doing things outside of college, be that volunteering in a care home to show your compassion and empathy and develop your people skills, or you know, volunteering for an animal charity or something like that. So you know, talk to the careers advisor, myself at Aquinas, or Mr. Pete at St Mary's, because we do have St Mary's students here potentially this evening, to talk about the plan, because it's going to be very, very difficult to get to June when we start logging you onto UCAS and starting the process, to find that you've not attended an online lecture, you've not listened to a podcast, you've not read a book, you've not done a short online course about medical ethics. So time is of the essence, really, which, you know, it is difficult alongside a challenging programme of A-levels and EPQ. But, you know, that's what, if you're going to succeed, that's what you need to do to add value, to have your application, and to have information to draw upon, and, you know, be convincing in interviews that you've really, really thought about this pathway. So I think I'd just leave it at that, really.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Thank you very much, Mrs. Lower. I'm just going to share my screen for a final couple of very quick slides, just so everybody's got the information, and then I'm going to pass it on to Q&A before I think Ms. Power will just sum it up. So if I just quickly go back to my slides. just trying to share my screen. I hope everybody can see it there. So just a few. Sorry, can you see it, Miss Lower?
Yep, we can.
Okay, fantastic. Just a few. There's a lot of information. I know an abundance, and that's, like I said, why we'll share this video. Just a few key points that I would just suggest to take away from being involved in this for a number of years. You know, make sure your son or daughter, if you're a student listening, make sure you follow the timelines in tutorials. So everything will be coming to you in tutorials later in this academic year. Just follow those timelines. Make sure you keep on board with it. We will be going out to you, making sure we know who wants to do an early entry, but just make sure as well that whoever the member of the careers team at your site, it's Miss Lower at Aquinas, it's Mr. Pete at St. Mary's, make sure your tutor know, just make sure everybody knows. We do go out to you, but just make sure that you're aware of that. What I would also just say is just all the speakers said it, just make sure you know what you wanted to do. The sooner you can be making your plans, your decisions, be doing it now. Please don't leave it till, you know, the next academic year or on the 14th of October decide you want to all of a sudden do an application for medicine, because you won't be able to do yourself justice. We won't be able to do yourself justice. And obviously those students have, you know, being ahead of the game, been thinking about it, being following the timelines, you know, will naturally have a head start on you. What I would also just say, don't get too fixated on one university or career path. The reason I say that is Oxford, as Lauren said, they will try to do it in the round in terms of making sure they pick the right candidates, but it still to a certain degree is a snapshot in time. You know, if I looked at the students who apply every year, I would be very wary about saying any student's definitely going to get through. We have obviously a lot more wider view of those students, but, and I think Miss Lowe would agree, it's there's no certainties. There is nobody would really put a lot of money on to say this person's definitely going to be offered a place, because it is just so competitive, and it's very hard to make any sound, guarantees about that. So please just don't get too fixated on whether it's going to Oxford or becoming a doctor, etc. There's lots and lots of valuable careers out there. I always use the example, there was a student a few years ago with us who wanted to become a doctor. He didn't get any offers to study medicine in the first year, so he decided to reapply the second year. That's absolutely fine once he had the grades confirmed. He didn't get a place for the second year. He was going back for a third year to try and become a doctor. And the problem with that is, at that stage, you've got to be thinking of a plan B. He didn't, and I personally think he was making himself unemployable for almost any career, because he was very clever, obviously very articulate, but for whatever reasons, he was getting knocked back from being put onto a medical degree. He was just making himself then look, that he didn't have sort of common sense, or, that just general knowledge, awareness about himself. So as a previous employee myself, I'd be looking at going, well, why do you keep going back, if etc. So please just don't get too fixated on just one university or career. Have a goal. Do your best to go for it, but also just be aware sometimes there's a certain amount of luck, or doing the right thing, or being on your best form on the day. So please don't let, don't get too fixated. As I said at the start, just for parents, students, the UCAS application form, the actual application form is relatively simple online. And then last but not least, they will take it holistically, everything into account, but your grades at the end of year 2 are really key for predicted grades. And that is just simply, if, we have to base your predictions very much on what you've done in this year. And students who say, well, I didn't try that hard, I didn't do this, I didn't do that, it's very hard for us to predict much higher than what you achieve at the end of year 12. So please, now is the time to be doing your best. That is really key, because one of the things they will look at, a yes or no, is just what are your predicted grades. If you've got the correct predicted grades, you're likely to be sort of in the ballpark to go through to the next stage. If you've not got them, it's unlikely you'll get through to that next stage. So please do try your best. And then just the last slide for me before I put it onto Q&A. We're going to put the chat in Q&A, sorry, the Q&A in the chat. So if you've got any questions, you can just be putting them in the chat. If you've got any follow-up questions, if you think of anything afterwards, please email us at careers@ctksfc.ac.uk. I'll put that in the chat now. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. Sorry, I realised I've somehow knocked my own camera off. So if you've got any questions, please put it in the chat. Very unfortunately, I think I turned my camera off when I realised. Unfortunately, Lauren, who was from the University of Oxford, has some really bad news a few minutes ago. I don't know what it is, but she says it's devastating family news. So obviously, I'm sure our thoughts are with her because something must have happened. So we've got myself, we've got Miss Lower, Miss Power, we've got Sean, who's the veterinary at Surrey, Asad, who's dentistry, and we've got Lorena, who's a former student who's currently studying at Cambridge. So if you do have any questions, I know it was very thorough, those presentations, please do put them in the chat and I will try and moderate it. Excuse me. So yeah, so that is the main end of the presentation. But if you do have any questions, if you do want to just be typing them into the chat, I'm hoping you have the ability to do that. I think I've seen people put in questions in the chat. That would be great.
Mr. Pearson, whilst people are putting the questions in the chat, am I okay quickly just to talk through Unifrog?
Absolutely,
because there's some access that so all of our students now have access to Unifrog, and there's a lot that would be really useful, because I'm sure what a lot of everybody has said, you know, the extra things you need to do to prepare for these applications, and maybe you're thinking, okay, how do I get that? So I'm just going to share my screen so I can show you some of the things you can do on Unifrog to help. So everybody has a login. If you check your emails, put Unifrog into your email, it'll tell you how to log in. And it looks like this when you log in. And there are these three key things that I think are useful for you in preparing for a competitive application at the bottom here. MOOCs, which are online courses, webinars, and Read, Watch, Listen, which again is links to super curriculum. So under webinars, you can see these are historic ones you can watch at any time. And this one's particularly about medicine. So for instance, if you're applying for medicine or you want some help in writing your personal statement, these are good webinars that just happened. And then under MOOCs, you can put in, you know, whatever you're interested in learning about. So for instance, if this one's animal science, which might help with veterinary, you can see on demand. These are run by universities all around the world. Introduction to animal behaviour, 6 weeks to complete. That would be a really great thing to talk about at an interview. And then Read, Watch, Listen. Again, you put in the subject that you're interested in. So let's say it's philosophy. And then there are here lots of different TED Talks, books, art that you can access. And that's all you need. Every single one of you's got access to this. We buy it for all of you. And if you did those three things, that is more than enough, alongside some work experience, that's more than enough to talk about at an interview. And both myself and Mrs. Lower have sat in on interviews for medicine. And that's exactly what the sorts of things they want to speak to you about, and to have you sort of know your experience of that. So we've got some questions in the chat now, which is brilliant. So I'll pass back to you, sir, if you're okay to moderate.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'm just looking down the questions. The first one was from Patrick. Oh, sorry, Miss Lowy, are you taking charge?
I'm happy to take Patrick's question. Sure. I think the issue is, Patrick, you would need to look at what subject it is you're interested in, and the universities do specify whether they need a specific A-level. So I don't think you are necessarily going, it depends what you're going to study. Certain A-levels are an absolutely non-negotiable, for example, biology and chemistry to study medicine, but the university approach does seem to be much more flexible now. For example, if you wanted to study a language, you can often start a language from scratch. So it's really a question of drilling down on the entry requirements for the various courses. And as both our speakers from Oxbridge said, so both Lorena and Lauren, there are lots of different interesting spins on course titles and things at Oxford and Cambridge. So, you know, we've had students apply for theology this year, one of whom is not even doing religious studies at A-level. So there's lots of possibilities there. So it's a question of maybe engaging with by applying to something like the Unique Summer School at Oxford, or the Cambridge Summer Schools through the Sutton Trust, which open next week on Tuesday the 10th of January, so that you can get a taster of what it's like to study some of these subjects at degree level. But the information that you need, and this is true of all universities, is on their entry requirements for the particular courses.
And just to follow on from that, sorry, I've got a bit of an echo there. Just to follow on from that, it's another thing that's worth considering when you're thinking about your course is the success rates. So the universities publish how many applicants they had and what percentage of those applicants were successful. So, and quite often universities have two similar degrees. So for instance, you might have economics, 30% of all people who apply for economics got an offer, whereas econometrics, which is similar to economics but it's just a bit more mathematical, 70% got an offer. And so it's worth looking into that. So for instance, applying for law at Oxford and Cambridge, I think law is the most competitive course of all. Versus, you know, it's to think about, actually, is your priority to go to Oxford or Cambridge, or is your priority to study that specific subject? Because you might be more likely to get in if you did law with French rather than straight law. So all of that information is published on the website, so you can find that. So I'd definitely take that into consideration when you're choosing your courses as well.
Yeah, and I'll just tag on again to what Miss Powell just said. Actually, a good friend of mine studied, I think, anthropology or something like that at Oxford. He's a senior partner in a law firm because he did his law conversion afterwards. So yeah, there's lots of different ways, and it's trying to make the best choices. There was a question.
The other questions have been answered.
There was a great one about the importance of chemistry for vet science. I don't know if
yeah, Sian
has an answer for that. If you're still there, Sian. Whether chemistry is, I know you said it was a compulsory A level. If you could do we've seen some universities do offer a foundation year if you haven't got chemistry as an A level. And I think that's true for medicine as well.
Yeah, I think that says for dentistry, but
says dentistry.
But it's the same.
Sorry.
It's the same for It's the same for veterinary. Some universities have a foundation year, a foundation course. Others don't. So but it is pretty important to us. Yeah, sorry, Asad, probably answer for dentistry as well.
No problem. Yeah, so to answer Asma's question, you can apply to dental school without doing chemistry. That is 100% true. I know King's do that foundation year. At Barts or Queen Mary's, it's not compulsory for us either. So we expect biology, but last time I checked, we don't expect chemistry. So you can apply. It's just a case of looking at where you want to apply and making sure that they don't expect chemistry as a required subject. Because if it is a required subject and you apply, you'll straight away get rejected. You've wasted one of your 4 choices.
Brilliant. Is there anything more in the chat, Miss Lower?
No, I think we've covered most of them. Thank you, Sian, for putting the information in about the MOOC virtual work experience at Nottingham, which can count as 2 weeks of work experience as long as you get your screenshot of having completed it. So that's really helpful to know as well. But I think we've covered the questions. So.
Thank you. I'll just pass back to Miss Power then if you want to wrap things up, Miss Power. As I just said, just for everybody, we will be sharing this video in the next couple of days. We'll email it out to everybody. But Miss Power, are you there if you want to just say a final couple of words?
I am, yes, just as we said, a huge thank you to everybody. I think we're hugely blessed here at CTK to have such amazing career support, such knowledgeable team, and you know, the teachers similarly, you know, many of our teachers take part in the small person. Many of our teachers have recently taken part in training where they've actually sat in on interviews at Cambridge as well. So across the curriculum, you know, we're really blessed with that, and we're also really blessed to have all these people giving up their time this evening. So I'll pass back to you because I think I'm needed by my 4-year-old. But
no
thank
problem,
you very much for your time. Okay.
I think my 6-year-old's about to run in as well. So yeah, no, big thank you to everybody for joining us. Thank you, Sian, Lorena, Asad for staying with us for the Q&A. Thank you for so much for the information. And yeah. We've put the CTK email address, and if anybody thinks of anything as soon as we finish, know that will happen. But thank you so much, everybody. Have a lovely night. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.